welcome to the McAfee Center Stage webinar series. My name is Austin and I'll be your host. This webinar is a brief overview covering the common use cases and scenarios regarding this topic. It is not intended to be an all-encompassing, as it's not possible to cover all detailed scenarios in an hour. If assistance is needed, please contact McAfee Technical Support. Our presenters today are Ben Ellis and Dominick Paynter. Ben is a senior technical support engineer with 11 years at McAfee, supporting a wide variety of McAfee applications and enterprise support. Ben handles beta and communications with engineering and support for all of application control. Dominick is a professional services enterprise architect with 5 years of delivering professional services solutions to our customers. With a focus on application control, Dominick designs tailored McAfee implementations to accommodate customers' environments and needs. Ladies and gentlemen, Ben and Dominick.
Hey guys, how's it going? Today's agenda, we're going to talk about application whitelisting, McAfee Application Control strategies, a little bit behind the scenes of app control, which will show you new features in 8.3 that's coming. We'll show you some other future changes to app control that will be after 8.3, and we'll discuss a little bit about 6.4 in the roadmap. So first, we just want to make sure you have an understanding of what whitelisting is. Whitelisting allows a proactive approach to security, so you don't have to rely on known malware or signatures. It does run on your endpoint. It can be configured to allow a baseline hardening for an operating system, so you can compare multiple what's been installed, what's not. So you with whitelisting, you have a safe and approved software, so you can block everything that you don't want to run. So some of our customer challenges are keeping up with unknown threats. We reduce some of that overhead by tying in McAfee Threat Intelligence and ATD. This helps us contain the malware faster and also allows users to have greater flexibility. So this is kind of what the malware landscape looks like. You can see there's known malwares, viruses, worms, and Trojans. There's unknown malwares, your APTs, your zero-day threats. And then you had the old school ways of Stuxnet and Operation Aurora. How does McAfee App Control fit in? As you can see, think of app control as a holistic approach. The left side of things is going to be blacklisting. So this is where we identify the malware based off reputation and known sources. And the right side is going to be more of the whitelisting approach, where we can block stuff proactively. So we tie into like TIE and ATD for known signatures. And so we can make sure that we protect from these threats from day one. Keep in mind, this can also be customized to whatever needs you need in your environment. So the whitelisting basics is an application attempts to launch. So we're going to go ahead and check your whitelist or the inventory of your application, so of everything that's installed on your machine that at the time that you installed app control. We're going to verify by hash, by name, by file type, if it's on this list. If it's not on this list, we're automatically going to block it. How would we allow things to run? So what we have is a dynamic trust model for intelligent whitelisting. So you're going to be locked down while whitelisting. So when you solidify a machine, what it means is you give things that are protected from write but allowed to run. So if things need to run on the machine that need to update these files, you can add by trusting the process, you can add by trusting the cert, or even trusting like a directory. We can even go as deep as trusted users. So what this does is these allow these processes to make changes to the whitelist and update like SHA-1s and different things like that, so we can track them. We can tell who, what, when, where, why, and then we can return the file back to being protected. So this is kind of what the McAfee App Control ecosystem looks like. So you can see that we would use this in conjunction with like an AV application and also with firewalls. So this would give you a holistic approach to locking down your environment. And then you have global threat intelligence, or you have ATD and TIE to make sure you can dynamically change files or dynamically run files. A lot of our products, our customers use this for legacy systems. So you can see we're one of the major products that actually still protect Windows NT 2000, 2003, things like that. We have a wide variety of Linux that we also support. But if you have any questions on what is actually supported, you can see our supported environments guide in KB 87944. I'm going to hand it over to my partner, Dom, and he's going to talk about the app control strategies. Dom?
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. So when we talk app control strategies, basically this is a formulation of recommendations that we came up with based off of what our customer environments look like and ways that we can help them. Don't think of this as you have to do it, just kind of guidelines and recommendations. So the first thing that we like our customers to identify is to figure out where they actually want to deploy. And I know that that sounds simple at a glance, but you'd be surprised how many customer sites we walk into and they have no idea where they want it. They just know they want it. So always keep in mind, what do we want to harden? And the reason why we tell customers to do that is because this product does have a lot of overhead. You're explicitly defining what's allowed to run versus not. So definitely make sure to figure out your scope and to put a lot of thought into that. The next thing is basically how you want to deploy the product, how you want to get out there and preparing your environment for it. You can do this first by checking the endpoint, making sure it meets minimum hardware requirements, making sure it has enough resources to spare, things like that. And then common deployment tactics. Within EPO, there does exist a lot of options to automate the deployment, which we'll go over a little bit more later. Then common pitfalls, which is basically issues that customers have run into in the past that we want to help you learn from, past experience on how to have a successful deployment. So when we talk about defining the scope of the product, one of our recommendations is to protect your critical infrastructure. This could be domain controllers. This could be any type of public-facing environment, just basically something that you want that has additional risk or critical to your business needs. Anything that has PCI or anything that handles customer transaction data, because that increased level of protection definitely helps you maintain compliance. Any sort of HIPAA compliance or healthcare information that you might want to protect. And then, of course, legacy operating systems that can't be patched. This is a good way of hardening those systems that Microsoft no longer supports. So to basically get your environment ready and before deploying app control, the first thing, like we said, is identify that scope. Then define the endpoint's role and the level of criticality. Basically, you want to understand when you can reboot or what type of graceful changes can be allowed in this environment, because you don't want to cripple your business operations at the same time. Then, of course, designing and implementing the automation that you want from EPO, whether this is done by tags and queries or a combination of both. And then you want to identify that the actual change process that you're going to have to follow, whether that's going through a CAB for approval or things of that nature. And, of course, prepping the paperwork to go through said change process. And then, of course, you want to identify your event purging and cleanup procedures. What we mean by this is what type of data retention policy your organization has. How long do you want to keep that data within your environment? Because we see a lot of customers that don't take that into consideration, and they say they want to keep everything. And then next thing you know, they don't actually plan to keep everything. As a standard best practice, we recommend 90 days for keeping your inventory and your events. And then, of course, understanding the best practices that go with the product, which you can get to by looking up on our knowledge base or, just Googling McAfee Application Control best practices. So then we have two different real strategies for how you can deploy the product. We have seen customers go the managed or unmanaged route. Managed basically means you take advantage of EPO and you have a centralized management solution actually controlling your policy, agent communications, and event notifications and alerts. So this is a great way to just stay informed of what's happening on an endpoint. But as we talk about critical infrastructure, we have a lot of customers that deploy this product to manufacturing or power plants. And when you think of those types of environments, they're really self-contained. So there's not going to be an option to phone back home, so to speak. So if you go that route, there's not going to be an McAfee agent. There's no GUI. You're only going to have the ability to manage the solution locally. And of course, this will result in a lower footprint because everything's self-contained running on that box. And you can disable a lot of the features that have to do with the EPO and the management solution. So best practices for the product. These are some recommendations and kind of the biggest ones that Ben and I put together from a list. First and foremost, you want to make sure that there's no duplicate rules in your environment. It sounds simple, but it really confuses the logic if it sees multiple rules for the same process. So definitely take those out. You want to have a formal change process in place to modify your whitelist. And what we mean by that is kind of like a strong governance process. If we take a top 10 list of all of our customers that are successful with the product in field, all of them have one thing in common, and that's they adhere to a very strong change management process within their environment. So they explicitly, if something happens and a new piece of software is introduced, they want eyes on all of that and they approve it beforehand. For environments that are rapidly changing where anybody can install whatever they want, this probably isn't the best product for you. The next thing is obviously a rigorous test and QA environment. You want to, McAfee does have a QA process. We do test our software internally, but that's not always going to mirror configurations and settings that our customers have or even what type of drivers are in there. So definitely make sure to test. And then, of course, you want to develop some sort of standard naming convention for how processes are handled. And that's really going to help you out if there's multiple people managing the product. If there's a standard naming convention, then everybody knows what to look out for. And you can, create run books and kind of develop processes around that naming convention a lot easier. And when we talk about naming convention, that's really where these next few slides come in place. Here we made a pretend organization, and it's called Ben's Happy Place. And then basically what happens is you have a policy that's going to be your baseline. And within your policy, that's going to contain rule groups. And the rule groups are then going to contain multiple different updaters. So what we recommend is naming your different policies based off of what type of role or function it's going to have. So whether it's baseline, whether it's accounting, whether it's an HR machine, that's where that policy name would come into play. And then as far as rule group name, what we recommend doing that is organizing them based off of the first section of the name is based off of which policy that's going to live in. And then the second set will be what type of application it is. So as you can see by here, we have Windows applications that go into the baseline policy. So that's why it's baseline_Windows. And over here, we have an accounting rule that has Adobe software within it. Therefore, that goes in, that rule group lives within the accounting policy. And then any rules with that accounting software would actually fit that naming convention. And that just helps you be organized. And again, that's critical the more people that you have managing the environment, and it helps you manage, these policies effectively. So then after that, when we talk about multi-slot policies within EPO, some products have the ability to have one policy, and then if you assign a different policy, it actually wipes out the previous one assigned. So App Control doesn't do that. It has the ability to assign multiple policies, and each policy will then become cumulative to the one before it. So when we talk about accounting servers, you would assign the baseline and then your accounting policy, and then it would merge those two roles into one on the endpoint. When we talk about retail, you would have your POS roles, and then again that baseline, and then HR would have baseline and HR and what have you. So the next thing that we talk about is the different modes of application control. The first mode is disabled. The second mode is enabled. The third mode is update. Then we have observation mode, and I don't think we cover it on here until later. There's a new mode called inventory mode. And what this is disabled is when you first install the product on your machine and it's not actually enforcing that whitelist or monitoring anything. Okay, inventory mode is there. It's just a little delayed. Then after that, you have enabled mode. That's going to be your fully enforced whitelist mode, where you're actually locking the system down and preventing changes. So everything will actually be enforced. Standard blocking will take place. Anything that's not in your environment today will not be allowed to tomorrow. So if somebody tries to run something new, that's going to get rejected. You have update mode, and think of that as kind of like a blind learning mode for the product. As you try to run it on that endpoint, it's going to allow it to run and add it to that local whitelist. Observation mode is going to have the same functionality, except it's also going to forward those events to your EPO server. So when you have a managed solution and it's in observation mode, if you want to create a policy, observation mode is to do it. If you're not creating a policy or you're planning on keeping it there for a longer period of time, we recommend update mode, but that definitely should be used in combination with GTI. And the reason why we recommend that in these modes, if a bad reputation is attempted to execute, it can still be blocked even though it's in those learning modes. And then finally, we have inventory mode, which is a way of just managing all of the software that runs on your endpoint without actually blocking anything. So all the protection really is taken out of the product. And this just gives you an idea of what people are doing on it. To give you an idea of something I saw in the customer's environment where they saw a lot of value out of the inventory was these were retail POS machines. So basically something you would see at a store behind a cash register, and someone was installing emulators so they could play video games on their machines. So the only reason why we were able to figure it out, because it wasn't malicious in nature, was because we saw it on the software inventory. And it's like, hey, why is there a Nintendo 64 emulator on this guy's machine? And we went through, we contacted his manager and got the issue resolved. So the next slide we have is basically what a deployment process looks like for application control from start to finish. Before you enforce the whitelist, basically you install the product by preparing for a batch and identifying what endpoints you actually want to install the product on. Then you place the endpoints into observe mode. Then you want to go through and perform day-to-day activities. And while that's happening, you want to go through and create your rules through policy discovery, which if you use the product, you'll see quite a bit of. And as you create those rules, you want to go through at least 2 weeks. And then after you hit 2 weeks, if you stop seeing new events come through, then you know you're good to go into enforced. And if not, then you want to go through another 2 days until eventually you stop seeing events come through policy discovery. Then once there's no more events coming through and everything's quiet, you can end the observe mode and actually enforce the whitelist and move on to the next batch. So this is the standard life cycle for what application control looks like. Essentially, you install the product, then you build your whitelist, then you review the applications by inventory and reputation to see what you want to allow versus not allow. Then while in observe mode, you're going to basically create and craft your policies. Then you have enable with email self-approval mode. So basically what this is a way of enforcing your whitelist, but if something's not on there, the end user has the ability to override it and send a request to allow it or not, which the EPO admin can then review and block or deny based off of that. And then when we talk about sustaining operations, basically how do you operationalize this product, what type of update life cycle you have when you're renewing software, things of that nature. We typically recommend trying to stay at least N-2 or within 2 versions of the current release of the product as a best practice.
All right, so we're gonna kind of get back into the behind the scenes of app control. So this slide here is going to talk about how we do our execution decision flow. So we can see that the deny policy is going to be the main thing. So if you deny a hash, a name, a check, then it's going to take ultimate precedence. Then we're gonna move down. So keep in mind this flow happens like in a split second. So once, if we detect that it's not on the deny policy, it's going to check threat intelligence exchange, and then it's going to also check your allow policy. So did you say always allow this checksum? Did you say always allow this by name? And then we're going to go and check the GTI reputations. Now, keep in mind that TIE is going to be for environments that have proxy servers and stuff like that, where GTI is going to reach directly from the client themselves. So if you want to control what is allowed by reputation, then TIE is going to be more, because McAfee itself controls the GTI environment. And then if TIE and GTI doesn't know what's going on with these files, we're going to throw it over to ATD. It's going to sandbox and try to see if it has any mischievous behaviors or anything like that. Then we're going to check to see if you're in what mode you're in, if it's going to be observe, update, or is the process an updater in your policy. Then this section is pretty much our trusted how we make changes to the system. So trusted user, trusted directory certificate, as we talked before. We now have a feature where we've added, I believe it was 8.0, where we started blocking things from removable media. And then we're going to continually check your whitelist. And we also now, as of 8.2 update 5, we added VTP fallback. This is going to only allow the Microsoft certs and McAfee certs for files that are not solidified. This can be turned off. And then we'll have the option or feature for self-approval, meaning like if you put app control on a CIO level or a C-level desktop, you can turn on self-approval. They will trigger the event and be able to say allow or deny, give you a reason, and it'll send it over to your EPO admin so they can approve it or put a block in place. As for fileless malware, that's where execution control comes into play. This is going to be how you can kind of control what user and what application can do. So like you can block Chrome for all users, or you can block any type of browser. I've seen people use this for controlling applications, different things like that. I mean, you can get pretty granular on this. And after it checks all this, we're going to check, this will give us the answer of is execution allowed or blocked. If it meets any of the things of your denies, then we'll block the execution. If you would like more information or details, please feel free to reach out to support. I'll be glad to talk more in depth about this. And you can also see KB 85695. This technically should work for both Windows and Linux the same way. This is kind of what the inventory looks like in EPO. So you can see that we can see complete visibility of what's installed and what's not. But please keep in mind, currently the inventory is for reporting only. So if you make a change here, it's for your reporting. It's not going to go out to TIE and change your reputations. It's not going to go out to GTI and change your reputations. You have to do that in your policy or in your TIE consoles. So we fixed the majority of our Windows Update fixes, Windows Updates issues in Update 5. What we were finding out is that we were missing hard links. So file copy, file denied, and how Windows Updates were making changes to certain files. So that should all now be fixed in Update 5. So if you're running any previous version of the product under Update 5, please note that you need to re-solidify your machines, because this will help you recreate your whitelist and make sure that everything is proper. And also see KB 91257 for the newer Windows Update rule groups, which will be added in the next extensions in 8.2.6 and 8.3. The next thing that's coming in for 8.3 will be a common platform enumeration reporting. This was added for governments. They wanted to see the CPE dictionaries. And as Dom was speaking, we have a new mode. It's called inventory mode in 8.3. This is just reporting of what's installed on the machine. There's no blocking, there's no nothing. So you can actually use this to just understand what's out there in your environment. So as I was talking about inventory mode, it's lightweight. It has a new driver on its own. So there's no way to block anything. It doesn't report what's not in your policies. It doesn't do anything. It's just to allows you to track files on your systems. If you would like to go from just inventory mode to blocking, we do require a reboot because it has to load the other driver so that way we can actually enforce. So this is kind of what the software inventory again looks like. You can see where stuff is going to report in how you have installed. It's more of, again, it's a proactive approach to information security, and you can kind of see what's allowed and what's not in your environment. So this is kind of how each of the modes work. So you can always go from disable to update or disable to observe with a reboot. There is an enablement called limited feature activation where we can restart your service or the solidifier service to start blocking. But the only thing to know is that all of our injection, like memory protection and stuff like that, will not actually be enabled until you reboot your machine. So you can go from update to enabled or update to observe. From enabled to observe, but just note that if you're going from update to observe, you have to end update mode or end observe mode to go from either of those modes. These are kind of just a table to show you how to switch between modes for inventory mode. I just want to give you a little bit more details on this new feature that's coming out. So you can see that where a reboot is required, a lot of people have gave feedback to us and said that we didn't document enough where reboots were required and stuff. So we're trying to enhance our documentation to make sure you understand when a reboot is actually required and when it's not. Some of these are some of the new events that you'll see when inventory mode triggers. So you can kind of see when the system booted into inventory mode. We can see when it was on reboot or when you ended your inventory mode. So the next new feature that we're adding is common platform enumeration. This is a standardized method of describing different applications, operating systems, and hardware. It's mainly used in by NIST, so government applications. It kind of looks like this. So you can kind of see that you can use dictionaries, and you'll see that it gives you an organization of what applications are and whatnot. You can use custom dictionaries and stuff like that, so it's not only limited to the NIST dictionaries. Another feature we're adding in 8.3 will be the additional of local groups for trusted users. So currently we can only use like domain users and things like that, or you have to specify like your computer name. So now we are adding the function to add local groups as trusted users. So you can use like your local admins to that machine. What's coming in the future of app control will be a lot of UX changes and version reportings. So the UX changes will come sometime after 8.3. I'm still waiting on confirmation of when these will actually be there, but I know they've been in the works for some time. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to clean up our McAfee default policies. Before, we've had a lot of, as you can see here, we have a lot of like applications that people don't use in their environment. We've had a lot of feedback, and people said, well, we don't want to use the McAfee defaults because we're allowing a lot of applications that shouldn't be allowed. So now our new McAfee default policies are going to be McAfee, Microsoft, and that's pretty much going to be it. And then it's going to be up to you to add what other applications you want. So another thing we're going to report is there is a command called sadmin config that handles all of our configs and stuff on the client itself, which kind of mirrors the registry keys. But there's some things that are not one-on-one. Support asks sometimes for a lot of these config settings, so we're going to start reporting that to EPO. So we just kind of want to make sure that there's like a one-on-one reporting, so that way you can report like one-off. So if support comes to you and says, hey, change this config, then you can still report on it and know where you made that changes in your environment. Currently, there's no way to actually report back where you made those changes, so it gets a little hairy when you start doing big things. So another thing we're going to add is role duplication identification. So you can kind of see here that we're going to add pop-ups that say, hey, you've already added this here, so you may cause conflicts. Do you or we might show where you allow one and you ban one, so it's basically going to like even itself out. But just know that most restrictive will take precedence. So if you have both and you have a block, the block's going to take more restrictive instead of nutrients. So we're also going to give you identifications for role conflicting. That's where I was telling you about. You would have a conflict with block or allow. So we're going to be, so another feedback we had is because of rule duplications and some of these rule groups being large, you weren't able to search for where you put that last executable or hash or installer or something like that. So we're giving the ability to search these rule groups instead of exporting your policy and manually looking through them. So you can kind of see here we can search for installers and we'll see which rule group it's at, or we can search for a hash and it'll tell us where it's at. Now, one thing that is coming as of this month sometime is our new versioning change. We used to say 8.2.1 update 5, update 4, and people were like, how do I know which one I have? It's a minor version and stuff like that. So now we're kind of changing our new to this new versioning changes. So now when we release something, it's going to be 8.2 and then like 6. And then if we have like a hotfix or something, then we'll have the build. So that way we'll be able to quickly identify what version you have out there. This is just really more standard in the in technology. So most naming conventions for software is kind of going this way. What we have coming in 8.3 that we've talked about is the inventory mode, the CPE reporting, and the trusted local user groups. So again, the inventory, this is kind of just comes back around to what inventory mode is. I'm not going to really cover a lot of this. Again, it's for NIS CPE information and for swarm compliance. Most of these are our government customers. Now 6.4 for Linux, we've started working on the build as target tool. This helps us build kernels on a 0-day level. We've had a lot of support or feedback saying that we're not keeping up with the latest kernel releases. So we've been working with our Linux team engineers extensively on building a tool that will actually compile itself on any release. Now keep in mind, there is still limitations like newer kernels from like for example, some of the Linux operating systems changed from 4.8 kernel to 5. Kernel. We didn't support the 5. Kernel at the time, so it doesn't know how to build onto the newer kernels. So sometimes that takes 60 days to actually release. We've added checksum as updater into Linux, and we've added observe mode in 6.3. So hopefully with these changes, Linux is starting to actually get to be manageable and workable for you. We've had a lot of feedback saying that Linux didn't work, or we couldn't tell from the logs where stuff was blocking. We're starting to add like the McAfee Applications rule group to Linux. We're starting to see it because more people are going to Linux because of all these vulnerabilities in Windows. So as I was telling, the build as target tool, it's to provide help with the 60-day SLA for kernel releases. Currently, we have a 60-day limitation on when a kernel released versus when we support it. We have a process now that you can open a case with support for an unsupported kernel, and it'll get processed by the product managers and engineering management for Linux, and so we can decide what comes in the next version. Linux typically releases every month. So on patch, just like we do with Windows, we're starting to release everything on patch Tuesday. So our next release for Linux and Windows should be around February 11th, but please note that is subject to change as we find things. So this could mean that 8.3 is pushed back, or 6.4.2 if we find vulnerabilities in our QA testing or any issues. But currently typically the release cycle is monthly on patch Tuesday, just like the rest of our McAfee products. So here's kind of a roadmap now that we've kind of talked about that, where we don't have any dates, but you can see that we're working on stability and quality of our products, because we want to make sure that the product is working great. We've had some bad track issues where quality wasn't so good. Customers are giving feedback saying that they're our QA and they shouldn't be. So we do hear you, and so we're working on making that better. Then we're working towards simplifying the user experiences. This is where we're going to clean up our policies. We're going to make the CLI versus EPO almost a one-on-one thing, so that way it's very easy for you and your admins, and we're going to help you find the best practices. So if we have tools that we're working on in support that will be scanning your logs and we'll be able to, and policies, and we'll be able to help you tell where you need to fix things and where we should be utilizing best practices. While we're working on that, we're going to be rolling into Envision EPO integration, and this is why we're doing the lightweight drivers and trying to slim down the product, because once we go to the cloud, we want to make sure that everything runs smooth and doesn't take performance hits. And eventually we're going to be adding Mac OS. We're going to be adding the Mac OS, and I've heard things of ARM, the ARM processors. So these are kind of new stuff that's coming. I just wanted to give you a picture, and we're also kind of working towards, for Linux, we're working towards a kernel dependency. So we're going kernelless. I'm hoping to get this out within the next, by 6.5, but this is still being worked on.
Thank you, Ben. We are expanding our customer self-service capabilities, including but not limited to our McAfee Enterprise Support app for Android and iOS, new product support pages, the support community, McAfee Support YouTube channel, social media help needs on Facebook and Twitter. The EPO Support Center plugin is available for you to download with your EPO application, free of cost. You can learn more about the EPO Support Center on the McAfee Support YouTube channel and on support.mcafee.com. Together is power. This concludes today's webinar.